Hey folks, my name is Cooper, and I am currently working on a video game, my first ever game, I call Discovery. This is a turn-based RPG that is mostly based on rhythm mechanics. The rhythm mechanics are based on moves, so in here you can see something like synthesize. The word synthesize will pop up on the screen and you hit the letters to spell out the word in a rhythmic format. Um, I call it like Scrabble rules, so something like an A or an I or an R that are really common letters give you just a couple of points if you hit them, and then something like a Z and synthesize gives you a lot of points. In this is my second devlog. I wanted to just kind of show off a couple of the new things I have come up with. I'm planning on putting a demo out this coming Wednesday, which will be June 4th. June 4th. I'm pretty sure it's June 4th. And that will have just a little 5 to 10 minute complete loop that I think will just give you a decent look at the basic mechanics and I guess the feel for the game. At this point, I've put together everything. The only thing that I did not put together myself is the music. This is all royalty-free music that I've found. So other than that, the sound effects I've put together, the art, as you can tell, is not particularly professional made. All the coding, all the writing, all that has been done by me, which I understand it is not going to be necessarily a masterpiece. It's not going to be the greatest game ever created. I'm not creating Undertale 2.0. But I hope, if nothing else, it will be something I can be proud of. And will have a consistent theme throughout, I guess is really what I'm going for. So one of the things that I added that actually took me longer than expected was just adding the sprite of the character that is talking over on this side. At this point, it really is just Disco that is talking to you. Your Discovery robot, your Discovery partner, who is your main companion along this journey. So you can see Disco popping up there. Generally, in the future, there will be other characters. I'll go ahead and give y'all a little spoiler. There are going to be other sentient life forms that you encounter on this planet. And obviously, you as the character will eventually have some lines of dialogue as well. Another thing that I've added is this ability to unlock moves with DNA points. DNA points are earned through battle. Right now I have 0 DNA points, so I can't necessarily unlock any moves, but that is another thing that I've added. As you can see, it looks like I messed up the player sprite within combat, which I am just now noticing, which is unfortunate, but I will have to fix that eventually. You can also see another issue that popped up while my brother was testing the game out, actually, is that these letters will overlap sometimes, but I'm going to show off a little bit of that in a second, but first I just wanted to show off the basic combat. So as you can see, there's a few different statuses based on your timing. The timing you have determines how much credit you get for the letter. So let's say that you get a yikes that's within 50% of the timing, that's going to give you 50% damage on the move. A perfect is going to give you full damage. When I say the move, I mean the specific letter, because again, the S is going to have a certain number of points, the N is going to have a certain number of points, and again, something like the Z, right? If you hit the Z on a perfect, you're going to get far more damage than anything else. So a little bit more polish on some of these things. These have their own little pop-ups. They pop up in time. You notice the cues disappear right away. This is the general sequence that I've got set up. Obviously, something like even just having the dialogue auto-complete when I click or hit the spacebar is something that's new. This is something new. This is a little DNA symbol that I have. So when you've actually defeated the character, you can come in here and see, oh, okay, this is Sunflorus. I just defeated and unlocked this life form. And as you can see, it is no longer here on the minimap. When I try to click, you hear that sound effect that indicates that, yes, this is not something I can interact with anymore. So next, I'm going to show off a little bit of my brother's demo gameplay. I was lucky to have both my brother and sister in town for my birthday last week, and since it was my birthday, I was able to convince them to come test out my game for me, and it was an interesting QA test. So one thing that I found that was interesting with my brother's gameplay, my sister and I have a much more similar, I guess, brain, in terms of we're both very analytical. My little sister's, she's going to law school. I mean, we're both very smart people. I'm not going to downplay us, but my brother is a little bit more, I would say, patient, a little bit more, frankly, just disciplined in the way that he looks at things. So I noticed that he spent much more time actually trying to figure out what the effects of these characters were. So as you can see, that text box at the beginning was indicating or giving the player a hint as to what the enemy's effects were. So a couple of the effects include something like reversing the word. As you can see in this case, this is a reversal, right? So douse becomes ESUOD. He was able to somewhat pick up on that, but you can see on that first one, he still struggled with it to a decent extent. However, he actually went through it again. Unlike me and my sister, who are a little bit, I would say, a little bit more impatient, a little bit more spontaneous, and we just sort of figured it out in our minds and would type the letters. My brother actually sat there and said, okay, I am going to look at harden on the keyboard, look at those 6 letters, and then I'm going to backtrace that. So he actually placed his fingers on the keyboard and backtracked, which I found very interesting. And as you can see, he got some pretty decent mileage out of it. The one thing, though, that he did not necessarily pick up on particularly quickly are which moves do more damage. Obviously, in this instance, when I don't have something like synthesize, which frankly is a cheat code of a move, that's something that is going to be available way later in the game, right? He did figure out eventually that entangle, again, that's got more letters, it's probably going to give you more opportunity. But it was just really interesting to be able to watch each of them play test it in their own ways. And again, obviously you can see something like that bug with the display right there. So another thing that I've gotten a little more comfortable with just from like a developer's point of view is having my own cheats, I guess. You know, being able to test out the game without actually having to just play through it like a normal player would. Again, there are certain times where I want to be able to skip ahead like a player would not be able to. So something like this, again, these are my story nodes. I don't want to actually have to play through every story node every time I try to test out a portion of the game. So something like this, where I set the current node to whatever node that I want to test out, I've found that to be a very important thing to get comfortable with and to implement some of those systems into my game. Something like that's very simple, right? I'm just updating the current node to whatever thing I've got typed in. But then there's also something like this, right, where Disco's telling you, oh, it doesn't seem like we have a clear path across the river. This is because I am blocking it until you've discovered all the life forms in this intro biome. Instead of actually going through and forcing myself to go battle every single character every single time. Again, we've got one over here. I think there's either 6 or 7 total characters. What I've done is I've just put a little tip variable in here. If I set it to 10, which is greater than the number of characters, all of a sudden, look, I'm able to trigger this battle. Yes, I know this looks like it was drawn by a 10-year-old. Let's just say I have the artistic talent of a 10-year-old. So, again, something like that is something that I just gotten used to. This one is a particularly difficult battle. Although I will say thank you very much, Predasaurus, for turning this aim into something with a Z in it, because that makes us obviously a lot more powerful. You are not necessarily, again, another spoiler alert, supposed to win this battle. As you can see, Disco does not seem to allow you to retreat from this battle. The items are not there yet, but if you try to do an analyze, you'll notice that everything seems a little bit wonky. Generally, this battle is supposed to be, let's just say, a little more than the player can handle at this point in time. So, anyways, this is the final little bit of the sequence I have scripted out. As you can see, that last move did 72 damage. That is a very tough character to fight against. But yeah, I think that's about what I will show y'all for this version of the devlogs. Just wanted to show a little bit of the updates in terms of some of the scenery, a few of the cosmetic updates I've made, the combat, and then just talk a little bit about that idea of the playtesting. Obviously, it's great. You have to be able to playtest your own games. You know a lot of things that the average player will not know, so you do know what to test and what to look for. However, at the end of the day, you're not the one that's playing your game, and you're not going to think of things that the average player is going to think of, because again, I've spent a couple hundred hours. I spent 150 hours programming the game, not to mention the writing, not to mention the thinking about it, the art, the sound effects, etc. Right? There are just things that I've never considered, like losing the intro battle is something that I just have not even considered, because I don't really have to worry about that. I'm not learning the controls, I'm not learning the game at all. Things like that are very important to have somebody that's never played your game, and people that aren't necessarily long-time gamers. Having them test out the game is a very important thing, and that's something that I'm hoping to get some of my friends and family to test out the demo once I publish it this next week. So thanks for tuning in to this second devlog that I've made. Hope to have many more in the future. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any specific questions or would like me to show any of these systems that I've built, again, I've got a lot of code, a lot of panels, a lot of Unity objects, all this sort of stuff. Obviously, nobody's going to be asking me for art advice, but in terms of the programming and the systems I've built, I do think I've got some pretty good experience and some knowledge worth sharing. I will try to put together some stuff on my own for these future devlogs in terms of actually showing some of the code. But if y'all have any specific questions, I would be more than happy to build a couple of videos based on that. So thanks again for watching, and yeah, I hope y'all have a great day.